The war on terror is not confined strictly to the Al-Qaeda that we're chasing. The war on terror involves Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
There was a strong argument for looking at Iraq before September 11. What September 11 taught us is that we can wait too long in the presence of a known and a visible threat.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
Get different estimates about precisely how close he is. We do know that he is actively pursuing a nuclear weapon.
Prior to the war, the administration was reading intelligence that was often vague, sometimes contradictory, rarely definitive.
Americans need to know I'll be making up my mind based upon the latest intelligence.
Unlike the intelligence, though, the message the administration rolled out in the fall of 2002 was sharp and clear.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is a mass...
What was missing from all the speeches and television appearances were the caveats and contrary evidence from their own intelligence agencies.
The Iraqi regime could launch a biological or chemical attack in as little as 45 minutes.
In a classified report circulated within the administration in late September 2002, the Defense Intelligence Agency stated that there was no reliable information on whether Iraq is producing or stockpiling chemical weapons.
But we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud.
At the same time, the Pentagon's Special Intelligence Office was coming up short of proving Saddam had current and active links to al-Qaeda.
As you watch this growing divergence between what was being said by policymakers and what you knew was the intelligence, what conclusions were you drawing?
Well, the conclusion that I ultimately came to was that this was a matter of, as I called it, faith-based intelligence. They were cherry-picking the information that we provided to use whatever pieces of it that fit their overall interpretation. And worse than that, they were dropping qualifiers and distorting some of the information that we provided to make it seem more alarmist and more dangerous than the information that we were giving them.
The fall campaign would culminate with a speech by President Bush on October 7th in Cincinnati.
Facing clear evidence of peril, we cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun, that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud. Information from a high-ranking Iraqi nuclear engineer who had defected revealed that despite his public promises, Saddam Hussein had ordered his nuclear program to continue.
The defector mentioned in the president's speech came to the administration's attention via Ahmed Chalabi. Chalabi was also making claims about Saddam and al-Qaeda.
We've learned that Iraq has trained al-Qaeda members in bomb-making, poisons, and deadly gases.
With Tim Russert.
If your analysis is not correct, then we're not treated as liberators but as conquerors, and the Iraqis begin to resist, particularly in Baghdad. Do you think the American people are prepared?
Another assumption was that Iraqis would greet the Americans as liberators, an assurance they got from the INC.
I do believe we will be greeted as liberators. I've talked with a lot of Iraqis in the last several months myself, had them to the White House. The President and I have met with them, various groups and individuals, people who devoted their lives from the outside to trying to change things inside Iraq. And like Kanan Makia, who's a professor at Brandeis, but an Iraqi, who's written great books about the subject, knows the country intimately.
A brutal dictator with a history of reckless aggression, with ties to terrorism, with great potential wealth, will not be permitted to dominate a vital region and threaten the United States. Our intelligence officials estimate that Saddam Hussein had the materials to produce as much as 500 tons of sarin, mustard, and VX nerve agent.
The public case, though, rested on imminent threat.
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
The White House has since admitted that the 16 words about uranium yellowcake from Africa were a mistake. What they have not explained is how something that had been investigated 12 months earlier at the request of the Vice President could have still made it into a State of the Union speech. Greg Thielman had investigated rumors of African uranium sales to Iraq a year before the President's speech.
As I recall, it was a human intelligence report that came to the United States. In this case, our specialists, who were weapons intelligence experts, and the African experts, and the Middle Eastern experts in the Intelligence Bureau, were all of one accord that this was a bad story.
Sources are technical, such as intercepted telephone conversations.
8 days after the President's State of the Union address, Secretary Powell would present the administration's case to the UN.
I cannot tell you everything that we know, but what I can share with you, when combined with what all of us have learned over the years, is deeply troubling.
The Secretary laid out al-Qaeda links.
Iraq today harbors a deadly terrorist network headed
evidence of chemical and biological weapon stores.
Saddam Hussein has chemical weapons. Saddam Hussein has used such weapons.
And evidence of an active nuclear program.
Saddam Hussein already possesses 2 out of the 3 key components needed to build a nuclear bomb. He has a cadre of nuclear scientists with the expertise, and he has a bomb design.
Though he did leave out mention of the Niger uranium story, the crux of Powell's nuclear case was that Iraq was procuring aluminum tubes and other vital parts of a uranium enrichment facility.
Most U.S. experts think they are intended to serve as rotors in centrifuges used to enrich uranium.
We started out being agnostic on this, but the more that we got into it, it was not a difficult assessment for us to arrive at, ultimately, that the Department of Energy experts were correct in seeing these tubes as being not well suited for uranium enrichment centrifuge rotors, but were in fact for something else.
Bin Laden met with a senior Iraqi intelligence official in Khartoum.
If one goes back to that very long presentation, point by point, one finds that this was not a very honest explanation. You had this very tenuous link made between Saddam and Osama bin Laden in the remarks of Secretary Powell, when his own terrorist officials, and virtually everyone else in the U.S. intelligence community said there is no significant connection between al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein. I have to conclude Secretary Powell was being a loyal Secretary of State, a good soldier, as it were, building the administration's case before the international community.
These and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
Axis was such a loaded word, however, because the Axis powers in World War II had been Italy and Germany and Japan. The idea that the world was now divided into Axis powers and Allied powers seemed to suggest a war coming on, which indeed was the truth.
It is both our responsibility and our privilege to fight freedom's fight.